The night was unusually cold for late summer, the kind of cold that crept under your skin and made your bones ache, even when the air itself wasn't sharp enough to see your breath. A fog had begun to roll across the empty roads that led into the heart of the village, and at the edge of that village sat the mansion, an ancient sprawling house of stone and wood that locals only referred to in whispers. Nobody called it a mansion in the ordinary sense, with pride or reverence. It was the Haveli, the cursed house, the one parents used to frighten their children into obedience. The group of 5 friends had heard all the warnings before. Each one of them was accustomed to chasing legends, myths, and whispered rumors. They ran a small but growing YouTube channel dedicated to uncovering forgotten mysteries and haunted places, and while most of their videos involved dimly lit basements, abandoned factories, or overgrown cemeteries, the Haveli promised something much greater. The villagers had warned them that people who entered the house never returned. No amount of pleading could convince them to stay away. And yet for Alex, Maya, Sam, Ria, and Jordan, that was exactly the point. The car stopped at the edge of the dirt path. Beyond it, the Haveli loomed in the fog like the skeleton of some colossal beast, its broken windows staring like hollow sockets, its roof sagging like an old man's spine. The trees around it were twisted, their branches knotted as though they were in pain, reaching toward the house like desperate arms. Even the air seemed different near it, still, oppressive, heavy with something unseen. "This is it," Alex whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He was the unofficial leader of the group, tall, broad-shouldered, and reckless enough to drag his friends into danger, with nothing more than a camera and a grin. He turned on the camera, its little red light glowing faintly in the mist. The infamous Haveli. "Locals say nobody survives a night in there. Well, tonight, we're going to find out why." Maya, always the skeptic, rolled her eyes, though her arms were folded tightly across her chest. "Or, we're just going to find out it's another moldy, rat-infested dump." Still, her voice carried a nervous edge. Sam, who handled most of the audio equipment, adjusted his headphones and muttered, "If this place kills us, at least the sound will be clear." Ria, the youngest, tugged on her jacket and glanced toward the village lights far behind them, already dim in the fog. She had been the most hesitant to come. "They weren't joking," she murmured. "The villagers, they were actually scared. I've never seen people so afraid of a place before." Jordan clapped a hand on her shoulder, smiling in that easy, careless way that made him seem immune to fear. "That's exactly why this will be the best video we've ever shot." The group gathered their gear, flashlights, cameras, microphones, batteries, and began the slow walk up the dirt path to the Haveli's front doors. The silence grew deeper with every step. Not even crickets dared to chirp near the house, and the sound of their own breathing grew too loud, too intimate, echoing strangely in the thick air. The front doors were tall, iron-bound wood, rotted in places but still standing as though the house itself refused to let go. Alex gave them a push, and to everyone's surprise, they groaned open with a hollow sigh, revealing a grand hall that was choked in darkness. Their flashlights pierced through dust and cobwebs, catching the gleam of old chandeliers hanging like skeletal remains from the ceiling. The air smelled of mildew, rust, and something faintly metallic. "Welcome to your new home, guys," Alex said, his voice falsely cheerful. He aimed the camera around, capturing peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and long empty corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. They moved inside, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, and every shadow stretched too far. Maya muttered, "This place feels wrong, like it's waiting for something." The group split their tasks. Sam set up the audio recorders, placing them in corners of the hall. Ria filmed from a different angle, her lens shaking slightly as she tried to steady her hands. Jordan explored with his flashlight, whistling softly, Though the sound seemed swallowed by the wall, it didn't take long for the first strange thing to happen. While Alex was filming near a broken staircase, he noticed something glinting at the end of the corridor. He turned his flashlight toward it, narrowing his eye. At first it looked like a broken piece of glass, but as he walked closer, the shape grew clearer. It was a tall mirror, standing upright against the wall, its frame ornate with carvings of vines and art. The mirror itself was surprisingly intact, though its surface shimmered faintly as if rippling water lay just beyond the glass. "Hey guys," Alex called, his voice hushed. "You need to see this." The others gathered around, flashlights bouncing on the carvings. Maya frowned. "That's not just a mirror. Look at those symbols." She ran her fingers over the carved eyes that lined the frame. Each one was etched with disturbing detail, lashes and pupils so lifelike that they seemed to stare back. Jordan laughed nervously. "Creepy decor. But it's just a mirror." But it wasn't just a mirror. The longer they looked into it, the stranger it became. Their reflections didn't match their movements perfectly. Alex lifted his hand, and his reflection hesitated a moment before following. Rhea tilted her head, but her reflection's smile lingered too long. Sam stepped back, muttering, No, that's not right." The camera captured it all. The delay, the flicker, the subtle distortion of their faces. Then something worse. In the reflection behind them, another figure appeared. A man in old tattered clothing, face hidden in shadow. He stood only for a moment, long enough for Maya to gasp and spin around. But when they looked behind them, the corridor was empty. "He's gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. But in the mirror, he was still there, closer now, just behind Jordan's shoulder. Jordan cursed and spun, flashlight sweeping wildly. Nothing. Yet when he looked back at the mirror, the figure was standing directly where he had been. Only, now the figure's face was visible, pale, sunken, with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a grin too wide to belong to anything human. Rhea screamed, dropping her camera. The reflection of the camera did not fall. It stayed upright in the mirror, as though another hand had caught it. The group scrambled back, hearts pounding, breath ragged. The mirror pulsed faintly as though it were alive. "Turn it off," Sam hissed. "Stop filming. We shouldn't be here." But Alex, despite his terror, whispered, "This is it. This is the proof. We can't stop now." The mirror seemed to throb at his words, and in its depths, their reflections no longer stood in the hall. Instead, the mirror showed them in another room. A room drenched in shadows, with blood smeared across the walls. Their mirrored selves stood still, silent, staring blankly at the glass, as though they were waiting. Then, slowly, one by one, their reflections began to move independently. Maya's reflection reached into her pocket and pulled out a knife she didn't own. Rhea's reflection started to cry, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Jordan's reflection tilted its head until the neck snapped at an impossible angle, the sound echoing faintly through the hall, as though it had really happened. The group stumbled back farther, but the reflections kept advancing, closing in toward the glass, until their faces pressed against it. Their eyes were empty, lifeless, yet they smiled. And then Maya's reflection raised the knife high. Maya shrieked, throwing herself backward. Her real hands were empty, but in the mirror the blade came down. There was a wet sound, and her reflection fell, blood spreading across the mirrored floor. At that same instant, Maya collapsed in reality, clutching her stomach, blood blooming between her fingers where no weapon had touched her. The scream that followed was not just hers. It was everyone's, torn from their throats in horror. Alex froze, staring at the mirror, the camera still recording, his mind refusing to process. Rhea fell to her knees beside Maya, screaming her name, hands shaking as she tried to stop blood that seemed to come from nowhere. Sam grabbed Alex, shouting, "We need to get out, now." But Alex couldn't look away from the glass, because in the mirror, their reflections still smiled, untouched, watching them suffer as though the game had only just begun. Blood pooled quickly beneath Maya, dark and glistening against the cracked marble floor. Her breaths came in short, wet gasps, as her eyes fluttered open and closed. Rhea's trembling hands pressed against the wound, but it was useless. The blood kept spilling through her fingers, hot and sticky. Jordan staggered backward, pale, his mouth opening and closing, but no words forming. Sam's voice was the only one that cut through the chaos. "Alex, shut the damn camera off. Help me carry her now." But Alex didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the mirror, his face pale, his body stiff, as though rooted to the spot. In the glass, Maya's reflection wasn't bleeding. She stood tall, her reflection smiling faintly, tilting her head as if admiring the pain her real counterpart was suffering. "Alex," Sam roared, grabbing him by the collar and shaking him hard. "She's dying. Forget the camera." The camera's red light flickered once and then dimmed, though Alex hadn't touched it. As it powered down, a sudden stillness swept through the hall. The group's breathing and Maya's shallow gasps were the only sounds left. They dragged her away from the mirror, toward the broken staircase where a strip of moonlight cut across the floor. The air smelled of rust and damp earth, but beneath it now was the undeniable copper tang of blood. Rhea sobbed quietly as she kept pressure on the wound. "She's losing too much," Jordan whispered, his voice cracking. "We have to get her out. We have to." He froze mid-sentence. They all did. From the direction of the hall came a faint tapping, slow and deliberate. Tap, 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 like footsteps approaching, echoing on wood. Jordan swung his flashlight toward the sound, but the beam only sliced through fog and dust. Empty corridors stretched on, filled with shadows that shifted unnaturally at the edges of the light. The tapping then, a whisper, soft but unmistakable, curling through the silence. "Stay." The group's blood ran cold. The voice had no source, no body, no lips that formed it, but it slid over them like breath against their ears. "Nope, we're leaving," Sam muttered, his voice high and strained. He bent down and tried to haul Maya up, but her body was limp, heavy, her skin cold. Alex finally moved, crouching beside her. "She's alive," he whispered, more to convince himself than anyone else. "She's breathing. We just need to carry her." Jordan grabbed her legs. Alex took her shoulders and together they lifted her, Rhea trailing beside them with her trembling flashlight. Sam kept glancing back at the mirror, dreading what he might see if he looked too long. The front door loomed ahead in the dim light. Their hope rose, frantic and desperate, until they reached it. Alex pulled on the handles. Nothing. They were locked tight, though he had opened them easily before. He yanked harder, veins standing out on his arms, but the door groaned as if mocking him, refusing to budge. "Move," Sam snarled, slamming his shoulder into the door. Pain shot through him, but the wood didn't crack. It stood as though forged from stone. "We're trapped," Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. "It doesn't want us to leave." As if to confirm her words, the chandeliers above them swayed violently, though no wind moved. Dust rained down, stinging their eyes, and the air thickened, until it felt like breathing through water. Maya suddenly jerked in their arms, her eyes flying open. She gasped, her face twisted in agony, but when her lips parted, it wasn't her voice that came out. It was the same whisper they had heard before, stretched and layered, dozens of voices speaking as one. "Stay with us." The group screamed, dropping her to the floor. Her body hit the stone with a sickening thud, and blood smeared across the ground. Her chest rose and fell violently before her eyes rolled back, and silence consumed her again. "Jesus Christ," Jordan breathed, his hands in his hair. She spoke. That wasn't her. That wasn't her voice. Sam grabbed Alex by the shoulder again. "We're not waiting around. If the doors are locked, there's got to be another way out. Windows, cellar, whatever. We move now." Reluctantly, Alex nodded. His eyes lingered on Maya's still body, torn between fear and guilt, before he forced himself to turn away. They stumbled down a side hallway, flashlights trembling in their hands. The Haveli seemed endless, its corridors twisting back on themselves, leading them deeper instead of closer to escape. Doors lined the hall, most sealed shut, others creaking open to reveal rooms filled with broken furniture, moldy drapes, and dust thick enough to choke on. At the end of one hallway, Rhea noticed another mirror, smaller than the first. Its frame was cracked and jagged, but the glass was flawless. She froze, her light catching it, and whispered, "No, not again." But the others were already drawn to it, their footsteps slowing. In this mirror, they saw not themselves but the grand hall they had left behind. The reflection showed Maya's body still lying where they had dropped her,
Only, in the mirror, she was standing now. Her reflection was upright, head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes blank white. She smiled, lips peeling back to reveal rows of jagged, blood-stained teeth. Slowly she turned her head in the reflection, looking directly at them as though she could see through the glass. "Run," Sam whispered, his throat dry. They bolted, their footsteps echoing through the corridors as the air grew colder, heavier. The house seemed to shift, walls closing in, floors groaning beneath them as though the Haveli itself was alive and aware of their presence. They reached another staircase, this one descending into darkness. Without hesitation they rushed down, the beam of their flashlights bouncing across damp stone walls. The smell grew worse. Rot, mildew, and something fouler still, like decayed meat. At the bottom of the stairs was a door, half-rotted, and hanging off its hinges. They pushed it open, and entered what looked like a cellar. The room was vast, lined with shelves of shattered jars and rusted tools. Chains hung from the ceiling, clinking softly as if stirred by unseen hand. Jordan gagged at the stench. "What the hell is this place?" Ria's flashlight swept across the far wall and froze. Dozens of mirrors lined the stone, tall and wide, each one unbroken, their surfaces gleaming despite the ground. And in every mirror the 5 of them stood, pale and wide-eyed. But in the reflections, Maya was still with them. She stood among their group, smiling, blood dripping endlessly down her dress. Alex's chest heaved, his camera now nothing more than a weight in his hand. "This isn't real," he whispered. "It can't be real." But the reflections began to move again, and just like before, they did not move the same way as their real selves. In the glass, Alex's reflection raised the camera, and smashed it against his own head, blood pouring down. Jordan's reflection grabbed Ria and snapped her neck like a twig. Sam's reflection pulled a rope from the ceiling and looped it around his throat, tightening with a grin. The group screamed, and staggered back, but the mirrors seemed to pulse, their reflections pressing harder against the glass, as though they were trying to step through. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surfaces, not from their side but from within, as though something inside the mirrors was desperate to get out. Then in a chorus of voices that shook the stone walls, their reflections spoke together. "You are already ours."
The cellar trembled as the last echoes of the voices faded, leaving only the sound of their own frantic breaths. Dust rained from the ceiling, swirling in the thin beams of their flashlights. The mirrors still glowed faintly, their fractured surfaces trembling as though they were breathing. Each crack spread slowly, like veins across skin, and behind the glass, the distorted versions of Alex, Sam, Jordan, and Ria grinned wider, waiting. Alex stumbled backward, clutching the useless camera, as though it might protect him. "We have to go. We have to go now." His voice cracked, panic replacing the fearless bravado he had carried earlier. Ria's flashlight beam darted wildly across the room, catching glints of rusted chains and broken shelves. The light lingered on something in the corner, a door, small and low, half hidden by debris. "There," she shouted, her voice shaking. They sprinted across the cellar, the sound of their shoes slapping against damp stone ringing in their ears. Behind them came a sharp crack. One of the mirrors split fully, shards raining down, but instead of shattering on the ground, the pieces seemed to hang in the air, suspended, shimmering with faint light. Jordan shoved the debris aside, pulling the door open. The stench hit them instantly, thick, choking, like a grave long disturbed. Still, none of them hesitated. Anything was better than the mirrors. They pushed through, stumbling into a narrow passageway, lit only by the faint glow of their flashlights. The door slammed shut behind them. Sam whirled around, trying the handle, but it didn't move. His heart pounded against his ribs. "It's not letting us back. It wants us down here." The tunnel sloped downward, damp earth lining the walls, roots dangling overhead like twisted veins. Water dripped steadily somewhere, echoing in the silence. Every few steps, they heard something else. The scrape of stone, the whisper of movement in the dark behind them. Ria's voice was small, nearly swallowed by the oppressive air. Why us? Why is it showing us? Killing each other? Jordan shook his head, his flashlight trembling in his grip. It's not us. It's something using us. Copies, shadows. I don't know. He didn't sound convinced. As they descended farther, the tunnel widened into a cavern. The floor was littered with broken furniture, torn cloth, and bones. Human bones, picked clean and scattered. The air was so heavy with decay that they all gagged. Alex covered his mouth with his sleeve, his eyes darting around. This was a chamber, a slaughterhouse. Sam's flashlight froze on one of the walls. Strange carvings lined the stone, symbols, circles, and jagged lines, filled with soot, painted in what looked like dried blood. At the center of it all was a crude image of an eye, its pupil wide and blackened. Rhea stumbled closer, trembling. It's the same eyes that were carved on the first mirror's frame. Jordan backed away, his voice shaking. This place wasn't just cursed. Someone made it cursed. Before anyone could respond, a faint sound echoed through the cavern. At first, it seemed like dripping water, but slowly it grew clearer. Footsteps, bare feet slapping against stone. The group huddled together, flashlights sweeping in every direction. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were circling them, though no figure appeared. Then, all at once, their flashlights flickered. The beams stretched unnaturally, bending toward the walls, where shadows writhed like living things. And in the darkness ahead, a figure finally emerged. It was Maya. Her body was twisted, her head still tilted at that impossible angle, eyes blank and glowing faintly white. Blood still poured from the wound in her abdomen, dripping endlessly onto the floor, leaving no puddle, just vanishing into the stone. Rhea screamed, stumbling backward, but Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her close. That's not her. It can't be her. Maya's voice came in a chorus, layered and hollow. You shouldn't have come. The lights flickered again, and when they steadied, she wasn't alone. Dozens of figures stood behind her, half seen in the dark, their forms blurred like unfinished sketches. Some wore rags, some were naked, their skin gray and stretched tight across their bones. All of them had empty eyes and wide, unnatural grins. Sam's chest heaved, sweat running down his temple. They're the ones who never left. The figures moved as one, stepping closer. Their footsteps were the same rhythm they had heard before. Tap, tap, tap. Run, Alex shouted. They bolted through the cavern, the beam of flashlights bouncing wildly. Behind them, the figures advanced, silent, except for the rhythmic slapping of their feet. Rhea's scream cut the air as she stumbled over a bone, but Jordan grabbed her, pulling her upright without stopping. The cavern narrowed into another tunnel, and they squeezed through, the walls scraping their shoulders. The air grew colder, pressing against their lungs, and the whispers returned, soft, hissing, countless voices murmuring things they couldn't understand. At the end of the tunnel, they stumbled into another chamber. This one was circular, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a single mirror, taller than the rest, its frame so wide it nearly touched the wall. The carvings of eyes were everywhere, hundreds of them, each one staring with unnatural focus. The glass shimmered like water, and within it they saw not their own reflections, but the Haveli's front hall, the doors wide open, moonlight spilling through. Jordan rushed forward, hope sparking in his chest. It's a way out, it's showing us the exit. Sam yanked him back violently. Don't you see? That's what it wants you to think. But the temptation was too strong. The image was so vivid, so real, that for a moment even Alex believed. He stepped closer, heart hammering. When the reflection shifted, the hall disappeared. In its place they saw themselves again, but not as they were. Their reflections were bruised, broken, bloodied. Rhea's reflection was sobbing silently, her throat slashed open. Jordan's reflection was hanging from a chain. Sam's reflection lay on the ground with his skull caved in, and Alex's reflection stood tall, camera in hand, grinning as though he had filmed it all. Alex staggered back, bile rising in his throat. No,
No, no. Rhea clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. I don't want to die here. Please. We have to fight it. The mirror pulsed, the image flickering between the open door and their mangled corpses. Slowly the glass rippled outward, as though something on the other side was pressing to come through. The whispers rose into a chorus, louder and louder, filling the chamber with a maddening hum. Shadows gathered at the edges of the room, crawling toward them, reaching with long stretched fingers. Jordan lifted a rusted pipe he had grabbed from the cavern, his hands shaking violently. If it wants us, it's going to have to take us fight. The figures emerged from the tunnel behind them, Maya at their head, her smile impossibly wide. The chamber darkened as the light of their flashlights dimmed, the glow of the mirror becoming the only illumination. Sam's voice cracked as he shouted, "Break it, break the mirror." Alex swung the useless camera at the glass, but the mirror didn't shatter. Instead, the camera rebounded, the impact reverberating through his arms. The reflections inside laughed silently, their mouths moving in unison. Jordan charged forward with the pipe slamming it against the glass. Cracks formed, spider-webbing across the surface. The whispers turned into screams, a shrill chorus that shook the stone. The figures shrieked, their forms twitching, convulsing. The mirror pulsed violently, its cracks glowing with blinding white light. The reflections writhed, their smiles stretching wider, until their faces split open. Then, with a sound like the tearing of flesh, the mirror burst. Shards of glass exploded outward, but instead of falling they hovered in the air, spinning, glowing. The chamber shook violently as the figures lunged forward, their distorted forms tearing at reality itself. The group screamed, covering their faces, their skin cut by the whirling shards. The last thing Alex saw before the light consumed everything was his reflection smiling calmly, untouched, whispering words he couldn't hear. Then everything went black. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a long, immeasurable stretch of time, there was no sound, no air, no ground beneath their feet. Just an endless void pressing against their minds, suffocating, stretching seconds into eternities. Then slowly, the world bled back into existence. Alex's eyes fluttered open first. At once the coppery smell of blood hit his nostrils, so strong he gagged. His hands were cut and sticky, his face slick with something wet. He blinked against a dim, reddish glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere. The chamber was gone, the mirrors were gone. He sat up gasping, his heart beat wild, and looked around. He wasn't in the Haveli anymore, at least, not in any way that made sense. The space around him was vast and wrong, an endless series of walls twisting in impossible directions, staircases running upward, into nothing, corridors intersecting at broken angles. The place felt alive, shifting slightly with every blink. "Sam," Alex croaked, his throat raw. From the distance he heard coughing. A weak beam of light flickered on, sweeping erratically. Sam stumbled into view, his flashlight cracked, but still working, his shirt torn and soaked with blood. His face was pale, but his eyes widened when he saw Alex. You're alive. Where are the others?" Alex rasped. A voice answered faintly from the shadows. Rhea appeared, crawling out from under a collapsed arch of stone. Her face was streaked with tears, her legs scraped and bruised. She staggered upright, leaning heavily on the wall. "Jordan, I can't find Jordan." Sam raised his flashlight, sweeping it across the warped corridors. His breath quickened. "This isn't where we were, it's different. The house, it's changed." As if responding to his words, the walls shifted. Alex swore he saw a staircase curl downward into the floor like a snake, vanishing into darkness. A door stretched taller, its wood twisting like flesh. The house was breathing, mutating around them, shaping itself like clay in invisible hands. Rhea covered her ears, whimpering, "It's not real, it's not real, this is in our heads." Alex grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently. "No, it's real, and we're going to survive it. But we have to stay together." A sudden scream echoed through the twisted hallways, loud, guttural, filled with agony. "Jordan!" They bolted toward the sound, their footsteps pounding against shifting floors that felt soft, almost like wet muscle beneath their shoes. The scream grew sharper, then cut off abruptly. They turned a corner and froze. Jordan was there, hung upside down from the ceiling by chains hooked into his ankles. His flashlight lay shattered on the floor, its beam flickering weakly. Blood ran down his arms and dripped onto the ground in steady, sickening drops. His face was pale, lips moving soundless. "Jesus Christ," Sam whispered, rushing forward. He tried pulling the chains, but they burned his hands like fire. Alex grabbed Jordan's shoulders. "Stay with us, man. We'll get you down." But when his mouth opened, the voice that came out wasn't his. "You can't save him. You can't save any of them." Alex recoiled, bile rising in his throat. "No, no, that's not you," he screamed, his voice this time his own, raw and terrified. Then, without warning, his body split down the middle, as though an invisible blade had sliced him from groin to skull. Blood sprayed across the floor and walls. His organs fell in a sickening cascade, splattering at their feet. Rhea shrieked, collapsing to her knees, her hands covering her face. Sam staggered back, vomiting, his flashlight beam shaking wildly. Alex stood frozen, covered in his friend's blood, staring at the mangled remains swaying gently above them. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The blood on the floor began to move, slowly, deliberately. It crept toward the walls, tracing symbols and shapes. Within seconds the crude eye appeared again, etched in red. The pupil blinked. Rhea sobbed into her hands. "It's playing with us. It's killing us one by one." Sam wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, trembling. "Then we fight it. We find a way to burn this place to the ground." The eye on the wall blinked again, and the floor beneath Jordan's remains split open. His body fell through, vanishing into darkness. The ground sealed shut, as if nothing had ever happened. Alex grabbed Sam's arm, forcing himself to speak through the rising panic. "We can't stay here. We have to move, before it takes another one of us." The corridors shifted again, opening into a new passageway lined with doors. Each door was identical, black wood with iron handles, stretching into the distance like an endless row. The air here was colder, filled with a faint humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They approached the first door cautiously. Alex reached out, his fingers trembling, and pulled it open. Inside was a small room, lit by a single candle. In the corner sat a chair, and in the chair sat Alex. His double's head snapped up, eyes wide, grin splitting his face. He stood, the candlelight flickering across his bloodied skin. Alex stumbled back, his heart lurching. "That's not me." The doppelganger tilted its head, then stepped forward, raising a hand that clutched the same broken camera Alex carried. Only this one was soaked in blood. Sam slammed the door shut, his chest heaving. "Every door shows us something, something that wants us dead." Rhea grabbed his sleeve, her voice cracking. "Then we don't open them, we keep moving." But as they walked, the doors began to rattle. Handles turned, wood groaned. From behind the doors came whispers, moans, and the sound of nails scratching. They broke into a run, sprinting down the endless hallway, the rattling growing louder behind them. One door burst open, and a pale arm shot out, grabbing at Rhea's head. She screamed, thrashing, but Alex and Sam pulled her free, slamming the door shut. At last, the hallway opened into another chamber. This one was circular like the last, but instead of a mirror, a well sat in the center. Its stones were slick with black moss, and from its depths came a steady sound, drip, drip, drip. Rhea shook her head violently. "No, I'm not going near it." But even as she said it, a voice floated up from the darkness of the well, a familiar voice. Her name echoed, distorted, but clear. Rhea's eyes filled with tears. "She's dead. We saw her die." Then a voice came again, louder. "Help me, please. It hurts." Alex swallowed hard. "It's not her, it's another trick." Sam picked up a loose stone and dropped it into the well. Instead of a splash, a scream erupted from the darkness, shrill and agonized. The chamber shook violently, dust raining down. The well's surface rippled, black liquid rising until it spilled over the edge. Figures began to climb out, pale, skeletal things with long fingers and hollow eyes, their mouths gaping wide. They crawled onto the stones, their bodies jerking unnaturally, their movements too fast. "Run!" Alex shouted again. They bolted for the opposite corridor, the creatures scrambling after them, their nails clicking against the stone like insects. Ria's sobs filled the air as she stumbled, Sam yanking her forward. Alex swung the broken camera behind him, smashing it against the face of one creature that leapt too close. Its skull cracked, but instead of falling it split open, releasing a cloud of black smoke that swirled toward him. The smoke entered his mouth, his nose, his eye. He screamed, collapsing to his knees, as his vision blurred. In an instant, he wasn't in the corridor anymore. He was back in the Haveli's front hall. The doors were open, moonlight spilling in. Outside, the village lights glowed faintly. He could escape, he could run, but then he saw himself standing at the doorway, camera raised, smiling with blood running down his face. His double whispered, "This is the ending you choose." Alex blinked, and the vision shattered. He was back in the twisting corridor, Sam and Ria pulling him up, creatures shrieking behind them. They ran until their lungs burned, until the sounds of pursuit faded. The corridor narrowed into a small room, where the walls closed behind them like a mouth snapping shut. They collapsed, gasping for breath, shaking. The room was empty, except for one thing, a single mirror leaning against the far wall. Its surface was cracked, but faintly glowing. Sam lifted his flashlight, his voice breaking. I think this is the core, the heart of it all." Alex's stomach turned cold, the mirror's surface rippled, and within it, he saw Jordan, Maya, and countless others, all the faces of the dead staring back with hollow eyes, and behind them, something vast and formless loomed, too large to comprehend. Ria whispered, barely audible, "What happens if we break it?" The faces in the mirror began to smile.
The air in the mirror ring thickened like wet smoke. Every breath, James took searing his lungs as though he were inhaling glass shards. Claire's sobs were muffled, caught somewhere in the blackness that had swallowed the chamber whole. The flashlight flickered, weak, sputtering out, until the only thing left was the echo of that child's laughter, a sound so misplaced, so chilling, that it twisted James's insides into knots. "Claire," he whispered, his voice cracking, as if even saying her name might draw something closer. His hand reached into the suffocating dark, until it brushed against her trembling fingers. She clung to him instantly, gripping with a desperation that made her knuckles stiff. The mirrors around them seemed to hum, a low vibration beneath their feet, as though some ancient mechanism had been awakened. The faint outline of reflections began to return, but they weren't still images anymore. The glass rippled like water, showing twisted corridors, staircases that spiraled into nothing, rooms filled with shadows moving as if they had their own lives. Each mirror now opened into another world, every one worse than the last. James tried not to look, but the human eye is drawn to horror, and soon he found himself staring. One mirror showed Daniel's corpse, twitching back to life again, but this time its head turned fully backwards, its jaw unhinging as a black hand crawled out of its throat. Another showed Claire, except she wasn't Claire. Her mouth was stitched shut, her eyes sewn open, yet she banged on the inside of the glass, begging silently. A third mirror reflected James, only this version of him, smiled with a grin too wide for his face, and behind him countless corpses hung upside down from hooks. Claire let out a choking sound, her hands covering her mouth, as tears slid down her cheeks. "Why is it showing us this? Why are—" James had no answer. His mind reeled, a voice whispering in the back of his skull, "Because you came here, because you woke it up." Suddenly the mirrors pulsed, and one in front of them began to glow brighter than the rest. The reflection wasn't warped. It showed the chamber as it was, except in that reflection, Daniel stood alive, smiling, beckoning them forward. His lips moved, and though no sound came through the glass, James understood the words. "Come here, it's safe." Claire's grip tightened. "James, do you see that?" Her eyes widened with a desperate hope. "He's alive. We can get him back." "No," James snapped, pulling her away, but she resisted, stepping closer to the glowing mirror. "It's lying. That's not him, Claire." She ignored him, her palm brushing against the glass. It felt warm, almost inviting. For a heartbeat, her reflection was gentle, normal, her own eyes staring back without malice. "James," she whispered, "this one is different. This one is real." Before he could stop her, Claire pressed her hand harder. The mirror's surface rippled like liquid. Her arm slid through up to the elbow. James shouted, grabbing her waist, trying to pull her back, but something on the other side seized her wrists. She screamed, thrashing, as invisible claws dug into her flesh. The mirror shuddered violently, its glow darkening, filling with writhing shapes that clambered toward her. James pulled with all his strength, his muscles tearing, as Claire shrieked in agony. With a final heave, he yanked her free. Her arm was shredded, deep gashes running from wrist to shoulder, blood dripping onto the floor. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing hysterically. The mirror quaked, and the reflection of Daniel twisted into something monstrous, his jaw splitting down to his chest, rows of teeth, gnashing, his eyes voids of black. He slammed against the glass, cracks spider-webbing across. All the other mirrors joined, their reflections pounding, screaming, clawing, until the chamber became a cacophony of shrieks and breaking glass. James dragged Claire toward the doors, but they remained sealed tight. He slammed his fists against them, his voice raw. "Let us out! Let us out! Damn you!" The laughter returned, closer now, a childlike giggle laced with cruelty. From the corner of the room, a figure stepped forward, a little girl in a tattered white dress, her hair covering her face. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her bare feet left bloody prints with every step. In her hands, she carried a broken doll missing an eye. Claire whimpered, clinging to James. "Oh God! Oh God!" The girl tilted her head, humming softly, her voice echoing unnaturally around the chamber. Then in a sing-song tone, she whispered, "The house is hungry." The mirrors answered her in unison, their surfaces convulsing, as skeletal arms burst through the glass, clawing at the air. Dozens of hands reached for James and Claire, scraping the floor, grabbing their ankles. James kicked, slashing at them with the bloodied knife he'd picked up earlier, severing fingers that dissolved into smoke. But for every arm cut away, more emerged. The girl stepped closer, her head still bowed, and whispered again, "You woke it up. You can't leave now." Her words pierced James like ice. He stared at her, shaking his head violently. "What are you? What is this place?" At that, she lifted her head. Her face was a horror, a gaping maw, where her nose and mouth should have been, her eyes sewn shut with coarse thread. Yet somehow she smiled. "I am the mirror," she said, though her sewn mouth never moved. Claire screamed, thrashing, as the skeletal hands latched onto her wounded arm, dragging her toward one of the mirrors. James hacked at them desperately, his mind shattering with panic. But the girl's voice rose, louder, almost joyous, as though she were leading some unseen choir, and the mirrors obeyed. One by one they shattered outward, glass exploding into the room, shards slicing James's arms and face. But instead of falling, the shards hovered, spinning slowly in the air. In each fragment, a different nightmare played, faces screaming, people burning, children crying as they were drowned. The fragments swirled into a vortex, pulling at everything, sucking the air itself toward the gaping void of the mirrors. Claire's grip slipped. James caught her hand, pulling with all his strength, as the vortex dragged them closer. His muscles screamed, his skin tore from the pressure. Claire's eyes met his, filled with sheer terror. "Don't let go, James. Please. I won't," he cried, though his body betrayed him, inch by inch slipping toward the moor. The girl's laughter rose to a deafening pitch, the shards spinning faster. And then, without warning, one shard shot forward like a bullet, embedding itself in James's shoulder. He screamed, falling to his knees, nearly losing his hold on Claire. Blood poured down his arm. Claire sobbed, "You have to let me go, James. Save yourself." "No," he roared, his veins bulging with the strain. "I'm not leaving you." The vortex howled louder,
and then the floor beneath them cracked, splintering open into a bottomless pit. The skeletal hands dragged, pulling Claire closer. Her fingers slipped in his grip. James howled, but the force was too strong. With a final tearful look, Claire's hand slipped from his, and she was sucked screaming into the mirror. Her body vanished, swallowed whole. James was thrown back, the knife clattering across the floor. The vortex snapped shut, silence crashing down on the chamber. Every mirror was whole again, spotless, as though nothing had happened. Only Daniel's corpse and James remained. James lay on the cold ground, his chest heaving, his body broken. Tears blurred his vision. Claire was gone. Daniel was gone, and the girl still stood there, smiling with her sewn face. "Now it's your turn," she whispered. James tried to move, to crawl, but the floor beneath him turned reflective, a mirror swallowing his body inch by inch. He screamed, clawing at the wood, but his hands slid against glass. His reflection beneath him grinned, blood dripping from its teeth. As the house pulled him into its depths, the last thing James heard was the girl's voice, soft and cruel, echoing in his skull. "The house always keeps what it's fed." And then the darkness took him. The darkness that swallowed the room was not the kind of darkness born from the absence of light. It was heavier, thicker, as though the air itself had turned to ink. James could hear Claire's ragged breathing close to him, her nails still clutching his arm. He tried to move the flashlight, but the device was dead, useless, its switch clicking without response. In the silence, the sound of his own pulse became unbearable. Then a low creak, like a door opening somewhere far off, echoed through the chamber. But they had seen the only door lock itself. "James," Claire whispered, her voice cracking. "Something's here." He wanted to reassure her, to say something brave, but his throat was too dry, his chest too tight. Before he could gather words, a faint glow began to spread across the mirror. It wasn't light. It was reflections, hundreds of them flaring faintly like embers. Slowly, their images came back, but twisted. James saw himself hunched over, bones snapping outward from his skin. Claire saw herself, with hollow eyes, blood running down her cheeks like tears. The reflections weren't mimicking them anymore. They were showing what would become of them. Suddenly, the corpse of Daniel moved again, his head jerked upright, his mouth gaping wide, his neck twisted at an impossible angle. His reflection in the mirror wasn't broken or blank. It was perfect, pristine, alive. In the mirrors, Daniel smiled kindly, but in reality his rotting body staggered forward, black ooze spilling from his chest. He opened his mouth, and this time words formed, though they were stretched and cracked, like old wood breaking. "You shouldn't have stayed," Claire screamed, and dragged James backward. The corpse reached for them, its fingers elongated into James, acting on instinct, shoved Claire aside, and raised the blood-stained knife. The corpse lurched, and James swung hard, burying the blade into Daniel's neck. The sound was like metal slicing through wet rope. Black sludge sprayed across the mirrors, sizzling as though it burned the glass. The corpse twitched violently and collapsed again, but the reflection of Daniel in the mirrors continued smiling, shaking its head in slow disapproval. Claire's sobs filled the chamber. She was staring at the mirrors, her eyes wide, unblinking. "It's not letting us leave," she whispered. "We're already trapped. We're already dead." "No," James snapped, grabbing her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him instead of the endless reflections. "Listen to me. We're not dead. We can get out. There has to be a way." But his words felt hollow, even to him. The mirrors began to ripple, as though water lay just beneath the surface of the glass. Faces began to emerge. Men, women, children, all screaming silently, their palms pressed against the inside. They pounded against the glass, begging to be let out, their mouths opening wide in agony. Claire's legs gave out, and she fell to her knees. "Oh God, it's them, all the people who died here." The pounding grew louder, shaking the walls. Then one mirror cracked. With a deafening snap, a pale hand burst through, skeletal fingers clawing for purchase. Another crack followed, then another. Soon dozens of hands were reaching through the fractured glass, groping blindly for them. James grabbed Claire, pulling her to her feet. "Run!" They darted across the room, dodging the reaching claws that scraped across their skin, leaving shallow bloody lines. James swung the knife wildly, cutting at the hands, but each one that fell turned into ash, only to be replaced by more. They reached the double doors, but the handles were gone, just smooth, seamless wood. No, 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 James shouted, slamming his fists against it. The wood absorbed the blows like flesh, rippling outward. Claire grabbed him, pointing at the far wall. One mirror, larger than the rest, glowed faintly, with a soft white light. Unlike the others, its surface was calm, unbroken. There, she cried, without hesitation. James dragged her toward. They stumbled over Daniel's body, which twitched and laughed in a guttural choking sound, though its chest no longer rose with breath. Claire covered her ears, tears streaming down her face, as the corpse spat black liquid, and whispered, "It won't let you go." They ignored it, running for the glowing mirror. James reached it first, slamming his palm against the glass. To his shock, his hand didn't stop. It slipped inside, as though the mirror was made of water. He pulled back instantly, gasping. The surface rippled gently, beckoning. "It's the way out," James panted. "It has to be." Claire hesitated, staring at the surface. Her reflection looked back at her, but it wasn't moving in sync. Instead, it shook its head slowly, its mouth forming the words, "Don't trust him." Claire's stomach twisted. She turned to James, whose face was pale and desperate, his eyes wild. He was already halfway through the mirror, his body disappearing into the glowing liquid. "Come on," he shouted, his voice echoing strangely. Claire trembled, staring between the reflection and the real James. The pounding of the trapped souls grew deafening, cracks racing across every mirror. The pale hands were nearly upon her. She had no choice. With a strangled cry, she dove forward, plunging into the mirror after him. The world twisted. For a moment, Claire felt as though she were falling through ice water, her lungs burning, her vision blurring with streaks of light. Then she hit the ground hard. She coughed, rolling over, sucking in deep breaths of cold air. When her vision cleared, she found herself in a hallway. It was long, stretching endlessly, in both directions, lined with flickering candles that dripped wax onto the black stone floor. James was there, kneeling, his body shaking. He looked up at her, eyes wide with horror. "This isn't out," he whispered. "It's deep." The hallway groaned around them. The candles flickered violently, their flames bending toward one end of the corridor. Claire felt a pull, a whisper in her mind. A child's laughter rang out, high and mocking from the darkness. James grabbed her hand tightly. "We have to move. We can't stay here." They walked, though neither knew if they were heading toward safety or into the heart of the nightmare. The laughter grew louder with every step, echoing off the walls, multiplying until it sounded like dozens of children. The candles snuffed out behind them one by one, plunging the hall into darkness, forcing them forward. At last, they reached another door. Unlike the wooden ones before, this was iron, massive and ancient, with intricate carvings of screaming faces etched across its surface. The laughter stopped abruptly. Silence fell heavy. James reached for the handle, but before he touched it, the carvings moved. The screaming faces shifted, their mouths opening wider, their eyes rolling. A voice slithered out from the door itself, deep and resonant. "You've come far, but the house isn't done with you." Beyond the threshold was a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. In the center stood a child, no older than 8, wearing a tattered white dress. Her skin was pale, her eyes black voids. She smiled sweetly, tilting her head. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft, yet carrying through the chamber. "I've been waiting." James froze. Claire clutched his hand so tightly, her nails dug into his skin. The little girl giggled, skipping closer, leaving bloody footprints with every step. "Do you want to know why the house won't let you go?" she asked innocently. "Because you belong to it now. You've seen too much. You've taken too much." Her gaze flicked to the knife in James's hand. The blade was still wet with black ooze. "That isn't yours," she said. Her smile widened, showing rows of jagged teeth. "It's mine." The chamber shook violently, dust raining from the unseen ceiling. The girl's form flickered, for an instant becoming a tall, shadowy figure, with limbs too long, and a face twisted in eternal agony. Then she was a child again, giggling. "If you want to leave," she whispered, "you have to give the house something it wants more." The floor beneath them cracked, splitting open into endless darkness. The girl's laughter echoed through the chamber, rising to a deafening roar. James and Claire clung to each other as the ground gave way, dropping them into the abyss, and as they fell, the last thing they heard was the girl's voice, whispering sweetly, "Your lives, or your souls."
The night had become a suffocating silence, broken only by the ragged sound of Daniel's own breath as he stumbled through the dark corridors of the mansion. Every wall seemed to close in on him, every shadow stretched unnaturally long, as if mocking his futile attempts to escape. The mirror room was behind him, but its presence lingered like a phantom tugging at his mind, whispering in the back of his skull that he was not truly free. His friends were gone, Sarah's eyes still wide with terror, Michael's lifeless body sprawled in a pool of his own blood, Emily dragged into the depths of her reflection. He could still hear their screams echoing in the corridors as though the house itself had swallowed their voices to replay them for eternity. Daniel forced his legs to move faster, but the mansion's layout twisted unnaturally now. He had walked these same halls earlier in daylight. They had been straightforward, predictable. Now every turn led him back into a hall he had already crossed, the wallpaper torn in the same places, the dust disturbed in the same patterns by his frantic shoes. It was as if the mansion itself had transformed into a labyrinth designed only for him. Its prey, his heart thundered against his ribs, and sweat soaked through his shirt, yet a chilling cold gnawed at his bones, a paradox he couldn't explain. At one point he skidded to a halt, chest heaving, as he found himself once again facing a large mirror embedded into the wall. The reflection stared back, but this time it didn't copy his movements. His reflection tilted its head, grinning in a way that sent bile rising in his throat. Daniel stumbled backward, whispering to himself, "No, no, no, this isn't real." But the reflection stepped forward, placing its hand against the glass. The sound of cracking filled the hallway, as fractures spider-webbed across the mirror's surface. Daniel turned and fled, refusing to watch what came next. Every door he passed he yanked open in desperation. Behind one was a staircase leading down, but when he took the first step, it collapsed into darkness, like an open mouth, and he barely caught himself on the railing before falling into the abyss. He scrambled back, slammed the door, and nearly sobbed. Behind another door he found Sarah's body sitting upright, eyes glassy, lips pulled into a grotesque grin. When he blinked, she was gone, replaced by dusty furniture draped in white sheets. The house was playing with him, toying with him like a cat toys with a dying mouse. The deeper he went, the more the air smelled of rot and dampness. He could almost hear water dripping somewhere, yet when he turned corners, the sound vanished. Then came whispers, at first faint, then louder, like dozens of voices all around him. His own name repeated in different tones, pleading, mocking, commanding. He pressed his palms to his ears, but it only made them louder, vibrating through his skull. His knees buckled, and he fell against the wall, nails digging into the peeling wallpaper. Then came a moment of silence, sharp and abrupt. Daniel lifted his head, chest rising and falling in panicked jerks. From the end of the corridor, he saw a figure. At first, it was just a shadow, tall and still, its face obscured, but as it slowly stepped forward, Daniel's heart froze. It was him, his reflection, no longer confined to the mirror. Its eyes were black voids, mouth curved in that same sick grin. It didn't run, didn't lunge, only walked with deliberate slowness, as though it knew Daniel had nowhere left to go. Daniel bolted again, his feet slamming against the floorboards. He turned corner after corner, until finally he stumbled into a wide chamber he had never seen before. The ceiling arched high above him, cobwebs clinging to the beams, and in the center stood a massive mirror, taller than any door, framed with ornate carvings,
that twisted into shapes of screaming faces. He skidded to a halt, dread flooding him as he realized where he was. The heart of the mansion, the mirror room. The surface of the mirror shimmered faintly, like water disturbed by an unseen wind. As Daniel approached, his body moved against his will, his legs dragging him close. His reflection inside the mirror stood waiting, perfectly still, its grin widening until its jaw seemed impossibly stretched. Daniel's voice caught in his throat as he whispered, "Why me? Why are you doing?" The reflection tilted its head, and though its mouth never moved, Daniel heard the words inside his skull. "Because you came, because you looked, because you belong here now." Daniel tried to back away, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. His reflection stepped forward, and the mirror's surface rippled. A hand shot out, cold, skeletal fingers that clamped onto his wrist with impossible strength. He screamed and tried to wrench free, but the grip only tightened, dragging him close. His other hand clawed at the floor, nails tearing, skin splitting, but the mirror swallowed his arm, then his shoulder. His scream echoed through the mansion, raw and desperate. Just as his face was about to sink into the glass, the door to the chamber burst open. An old man appeared, hunched and frail, carrying a lantern that cast flickering light across the chamber. His voice boomed with surprising force. "Let him go." The mirror's surface shuddered, and the reflection hissed like an animal. Daniel collapsed onto the floor as the grip released him, coughing and trembling. The old man staggered toward him, grabbing his arm. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered, his eyes darting to the mirror. "This house has been cursed for centuries. Every soul who gazes too long into the glass becomes part of it." Daniel stammered through sobs. "My friends, they're gone." The mirror took them. The old man's face tightened with sorrow. "Then they are beyond saving. Only one may walk away, and it seems the house has chosen you. But you must leave now." Together they stumbled toward the doorway, but just as they reached it, the mirror let out a sound, a deafening shriek, like 1,000 voices crying out in unison. The glass cracked, then exploded outward in shards that flew like knives. Daniel shielded his face, feeling pieces slash across his arms and legs. When he lowered his hands, the reflection was no longer in the mirror. It was standing in the chamber, free, its grin wider than ever, its body rippling, as though made of shadow and flesh fused together. The old man shoved Daniel toward the door. "Run, don't stop until you see the dawn." Then he turned, raising the lantern high. Flames erupted around him, consuming his body as he hurled himself at the creature. The room filled with fire and shadows, as Daniel bolted down the hall, the walls trembling, the ceiling cracking, as though the house itself were collapsing. He ran without looking back, his lungs burning, his vision blurry. Doors slammed shut behind him, windows shattered, and the whispers returned, louder than ever. But finally, through the haze of smoke and darkness, he saw it, the front door. He threw himself against it, and it burst open, flinging him onto the cold, wet grass outside. The night air hit him like a wave, crisp and real, the stars overhead piercing through the black clouds. The mansion loomed behind him, its windows glowing with fire, shadows writhing against the glass as though screaming to be let out. Daniel stumbled to his feet, every inch of him aching, and staggered down the dirt path toward the village. He didn't look back. He couldn't. By the time he reached the first house at the edge of the village, his body gave. He collapsed on the doorstep, his bloodied hands pounding weakly against the wood before everything went dark. When he awoke, daylight streamed through the windows. Villagers surrounded him, their faces etched with confusion and horror. One of them whispered, "It can't be. We buried him 2 weeks ago." Daniel's eyes widened, his throat tightening as the words sank in. He stumbled to his feet, rushing toward a cracked mirror, hanging on the wall. The face that looked back at him wasn't his. It was the grin, the same terrible, stretched grin. And in that moment, Daniel understood. He had never truly escaped the mirror room. The mansion had released only his body. His soul now belonged to the reflection, forever. And so, the nightmare did not end with the burning mansion, nor with Daniel's desperate escape. Evil does not die. It only waits hidden behind glass, lurking in every reflection. You may think you're safe when you glance at the mirror in your room, or the darkened window at night. But what if the face staring back isn't truly yours? What if it's waiting for the right moment, the way it waited for Daniel? Some doors once opened can never be closed again, and some reflections should never be trusted. If you're brave enough, stay with us, because the next story might already be staring back at you.